Ever since those rapscallions had to leave that beautiful garden behind all those millennia ago, things have gone awry. I am Professor Basil Digby Winston, and I shall be your guide for this mini-series on the collapse of civilization. As humanity evolved, their fall from grace propelled them into the chaotic centenarian cycle of thinking they reached the pinnacle of all dimensional understanding, forcing willful ignorance upon themselves by forgetting how they were put here in the first place. Every single great empire had a fatal flaw. The Romans and their revolutionary infrastructure failed to realize that one can only conquer so far before the guy beyond your wall gets quite annoyed with you. The Mayans made a calendar that correctly predicted the 2012 cultural catastrophe, but not the drought that wiped them out 500 years prior. The British Empire, similar to the Romans, never thought of when the pendulum would swing and the chickens would come home to roost. Only this time, it would come in the most drab form possible, an economic collapse. And speaking of class warfare, the great Indian Empire culturally and religiously cemented that certain animal excrements were actually healthy to integrate into diets and skin routines. You can imagine where this left them. I suppose hygiene is subjective after all. And last but certainly not least, one as ancient as the previous, the noble and glorious Chinese failed to realize that putting your concrete on a diet of sand and your people on an extreme fast of political rights might cause some problems. So that was a handful of some key moments and highlights of the past 6,000 years. But there came a certain point around the 21st century when everything became a derivative of everything before it. Now, renaissances have been started before and copies have been made, but the line in the sand was when it became profitable to overload the common man with information with the intent of accelerating his own natural forgetfulness upon himself. This imposed a unique psychosis on the zeitgeist, making people seriously believe that things used to be better. This had the effect of weaponizing nostalgia. One can't blame them. Not even the greatest mathematician could predict that a consumer voting with their wallets for efficiency rather than efficacy would lead to robbing the willfully ignorant of truth, hiding it behind infinite layers of advertising permanently. The common denominator in every single nation was an incredible discovery: the fermentation of fruit. It became normalized, then glamorized. Entire cultures were centered around its consumption. Countless misjudgments, counterfeit realizations, and terrible decisions were made, and the moment it was invented, we hit a wall. No amount of branding, taste, or stigma changed the fact that humans enjoyed dissociating from their realities, many of whom perceived it to be doomed. Although it rewarded one with a pounding headache and the expulsion of the contents of one's stomach, it allowed cowards to escape their thoughts. even if just for a couple of hours, after which they could choose to repeat this process or face facts. Predictably, the majority chose to repeat this cycle. The end of this crucible was never reached, and many withered away. Despite global production processes coming to a halt around the year 2168, automation in factories had assured the steady destruction of nature. Only one sanctuary remained untouched by humanity's end-stage development, until recently, when a new humanoid species was discovered. Ancient manuscripts found scattered among old newspaper articles simply referred to this haven as Planet Bloemfontein. Our correspondent on the ground with expert credentials in survival and anthropology is on the scene.
I'm Nigel Godfrey, and today I'll be investigating a deviation of our DNA that managed to weave its path into the last cluster of paradise left on Earth.
For hundreds of years, this little corner housed the last generation of fantastical creatures. But now, the apex predator as of today is the Homo albus ebrius. This organism evolved during the 24th century after the majority of humanity started mixing everything with alcohol. It started with coffee, then desserts, and even normal dishes. Like my colleague mentioned, the line in the sand came when it was no longer put on labels, like them hidden sugar contents in the old days. The families with the most offspring, usually the largest consumers of alcohol, accelerated this process. Within a couple of generations, the human race's blood became infused from birth.
This is incredible. Here we see it discovering a fresh batch of genetically modified trees. It seems to be communicating in some sort of mix of Dutch and Portuguese. Maybe Flemish.
About a century ago, the process of infusion became so advanced that normal fruit trees were tweaked with the intent of bearing alcohol. Due to the nutritional values of the substance, it could only be fostered underground.
Crikey, we've been spotted. We need to get out of here. I've no idea how it found us, but we need to get out of here.
Now that was quite stressful. Let's take a quick break and talk about some contributing fauna.
Another major discovery is that of the Chlamys cutada, or spotted turtle, which mutated to leave its shell after adolescence due to the alkalized water supplies in its natural habitats, morphing into either the Python regius or Mantella baroni. The Homo albus ebrius misinterpreted the obvious danger of the first mutation of this species and decided to don these as scarves. Here we see footage I recorded in secret at a scarf gathering from a year ago. The other possible metamorphosis for the spotted turtle is that of the Mantella baroni, otherwise known as the froge. What makes it unique is the eyes having adapted to spot aromas as discoloration in the air around it, as well as the detached skin referred to as a putsac bungus in its maw that absorbs unknown fragrances to further analyze at a later date. The Albus ebrius has not yet been recorded interacting with the second mutation, as its serious squishiness is seen as a major threat. How incredible to see that nature adapts to scare off the predator that corrupted its own DNA. Such a marvelous natural intelligence. And now, let's get back to the main course.
I think the coast is clear. Let's go take a better look. I'm gonna try and get a closer look. This poor creature's all alone. Ah! 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 It's quite sad, but when one consumes alcohol alone, even when accustomed to the effects, the darkest parts of one's psyche tend to leak out. Desculpa, Tricas. De boca. This state used to be known around these parts as drunk verdriet or drunken sorrow. It especially sets in when one consumes alone. Hey. It's okay, big guy. What's your name? Coral! Coral! Let's take a walk, buddy. We've got a lot to discuss. Let's start with that diet, eh?
And so, despite humanity having lost the battle against ego, it reunited in friendship to pick up the pieces and start anew. Whatever direction they headed in, at least another attempt was made. Despite the depths to which we have fallen as a collective, at least we get back up to keep trying. Who can fault us for that? The endgame remains to be seen, but the likelihood that other humans besides my colleague and I were still out there trying their best to regain their God-given sanity was almost guaranteed. Now we just needed to find them.